The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. In 3 words I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. 2 roads diverged in a wood and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Love is an irresistible desire to be irresistibly desired. By working faithfully 8 hours a day you may eventually get to be boss and work 12 hours a day. The brain is a wonderful organ. It starts working the moment you get up in the morning and does not stop until you get into the office. Poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. A bank is a place where they lend you an umbrella in fair weather and ask for it back when it begins to rain. Forgive me my nonsense, as I also forgive the nonsense of those that think they talk sense. Education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. A poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom. The father is always a Republican toward his son, and his mother's always a Democrat. You can't get too much winter in the winter. I hold it to be the inalienable right of anybody to go to hell in his own way. Education doesn't change life much. It just lifts trouble to a higher plane of regard. I would have written of me on my stone, I had a lover's quarrel with the world. A mother takes 20 years to make a man of her boy, and another woman makes a fool of him in 20 minutes. To be a poet is a condition, not a profession. Half the world is composed of people who have something to say and can't, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. Happiness makes up in height for what it lacks in length. The jury consists of 12 persons chosen to decide who has the better lawyer. If one by one we counted people out for the least sin, it wouldn't take us long to get so we had no one left to live with. For to be social is to be forgiving. There are few sorrows, however poignant, in which a good income is of no avail. The greatest thing in family life is to take a hint when a hint is intended and not to take a hint when a hint isn't intended. A poem begins as a lump in the throat, a sense of wrong, a homesickness, a lovesickness. My sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. We dance round in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. I have never started a poem yet whose end I knew. Writing a poem is discovering. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. A diplomat is a man who always remembers a woman's birthday but never remembers her age. A person will sometimes devote all his life to the development of one part of his body, the wishbone. You don't have to deserve your mother's love. You have to deserve your father's. Being the boss anywhere is lonely. Being a female boss in a world of mostly men is especially so. Don't ever take a fence down until you know why it was put up. If society fits you comfortably enough, you call it freedom. If you don't know how great this country is, I know someone who does, Russia. I had a lover's quarrel with the world. I often say of George Washington that he was one of the few in the whole history of the world who was not carried away by power. Most of the change we think we see in life is due to truths being in and out of favor. One aged man, one man, can't fill a house. You have freedom when you're easy in your harness. The middle of the road is where the white line is, and that's the worst place to drive. The strongest and most effective force in guaranteeing the long-term maintenance of power is not violence in all the forms deployed by the dominant to control the dominated, but consent in all the forms in which the dominated acquiesce in their own domination. The world is full of willing people, some willing to work, the rest willing to let them. The reason why worry kills more people than work is that more people worry than work. A jury consists of 12 persons chosen to decide who has the better lawyer. Always fall in with what you're asked to accept. Take what is given, and make it over your way. My aim in life has always been to hold my own with whatever's going. Not against, with. A successful lawsuit is the one worn by a policeman. Education is hanging around until you've caught on. Modern poets talk against business, poor things, but all of us write for money. Beginners are subjected to trial by market. Poets are like baseball pitchers. Both have their moments. The intervals are the tough things. The ear is the only true writer and the only true reader. There never was any heart truly great and generous, that was not also tender and compassionate. It's a funny thing that when a man hasn't anything on earth to worry about, he goes off and gets married. A civilized society is one which tolerates eccentricity to the point of doubtful sanity. I never dared to be radical when young for fear it would make me conservative when old. There are two kinds of teachers, the kind that fill you with so much quail shot that you can't move, and the kind that just gives you a little prod behind and you jump to the skies. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. The worst disease which can afflict executives in their work is not, as popularly supposed, alcoholism, it's egotism. Poetry is a way of taking life by the throat. And were an epitaph to be my story, I'd have a short one ready for my own. I would have written of me on my stone, I had a lover's quarrel with the world. The chief reason for going to school is to get the impression fixed for life that there is a book side for everything. The best things and best people rise out of their separateness. I'm against a homogenized society because I want the cream to rise. Let him that is without stone among you cast the first thing he can lay his hands on. Take care to sell your horse before he dies. The art of life is passing losses on. Talking is a hydrant in the yard and writing is a faucet upstairs in the house. Opening the first takes the pressure off the second. I alone of English writers have consciously set myself to make music out of what I may call the sound of sense. No memory of having starred atones for later disregard, or keeps the end from being hard. A poet never takes notes. You never take notes in a love affair. Style is that which indicates how the writer takes himself and what he is saying. It is the mind skating circles around itself as it moves forward. Two such as you with such a master speed, cannot be parted nor be swept away, from one another once you are agreed, that life is only life forevermore, together wing to wing and oar to oar. The artist in me cries out for design. They would not find me changed from him they knew, only more sure of all I thought was true. Poetry is about the grief. Politics is about the grievance. I'd just as soon play tennis with the net down. The figure a poem makes. It begins in delight and ends in wisdom, in a clarification of life, not necessarily a great clarification, such as sects and cults are founded on, but in a momentary stay against confusion. A liberal is a man too broad-minded to take his own side in a quarrel. Forgive, O Lord, my little jokes on thee, and I'll forgive thy great big joke on me. Writing free verse is like playing tennis with the net down. You can be a rank insider as well as a rank outsider. We love things, we love what they are. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. I go to school the youth to learn the future. I am a writer of books in retrospect. I talk in order to understand, I teach in order to learn. You can be a little ungrammatical if you come from the right part of the country. Nobody was ever meant to remember or invent what he did with every cent. Pressed into service means pressed out of shape. Space ails us moderns. We are sick with space. Like a piece of ice on a hot stove, the poem must ride on its own melting. A poem may be worked over once it is in being, but may not be worried into being. Lovers, forget your love and list to the love of these. She a window flower and he a winter breeze. Love is the irresistible desire to be irresistibly desired. Next to nothing for use, but a crop is a crop, and who's to say where the harvest shall stop? Poetry is what gets lost in translation. It is also what is lost in interpretation. I would as soon write free verse as play tennis with the net down. I go to school, to youth, to learn the future. I have been one acquainted with the night. I am glad the invitation pleases your family. It will please my family to the 4th generation and my family of friends, and, were they living, it would have pleased inordinately the kind of Grover Cleveland Democrats I had for parents. There is no arguing with him, for if his pistol misses fire, he knocks you down with the butt end of it. He knew a path that wanted walking, he knew a spring that wanted drinking, a thought that wanted further thinking. Keep cold, young orchard. Goodbye and keep cold. Dread 50 above more than 50 below. Just specimens is all New Hampshire has, one each of everything as in a showcase which naturally she doesn't care to sell. Is due to truths being in and out of favor. Piling up knowledge is as bad as piling up money. You have to begin sometime to kick around what you know. Originality and initiative are what I ask for my country. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation as my two eyes make one in sight. Man that is of woman born is apt to be as vain as his mother. Time and tide wait for no man, but time always stands still for a woman of 30. Time and tide wait for no man, but always stand still for a woman of 30. Tree at my window, window tree, my sash is lowered when night comes on, but let there never be curtain drawn between you and me. Why abandon a belief merely because it ceases to be true? Cling to it long enough and it will turn true again, for so it goes. Most of the change we think we see in life is due to truths being in and out of favor. We dance round in a ring and suppose, while the secret sits in the middle and knows. We dance around the ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Two roads converged in a woods. He, Mitchell, took the one less traveled, and that made all the difference. Families break up when people take hints you don't intend and miss hints you do intend. There is nothing as mysterious as something clearly seen. An earthly dog of the carriage breed, who, having failed of the modern speed, now asked asylum, and I was stirred to be the one so dog preferred. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thinking is not to agree or disagree. That is voting. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Oh, give us pleasure in the flowers today, and give us not to think so far away as the uncertain harvest, keep us here all simply in the springing of the year. Style is the mind skating circles around itself as it moves forward. Something there is that doesn't love a wall. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. No wonder poets sometimes have to seem so much more businesslike than businessmen. Their wares are so much harder to get rid of. The brain is a wonderful organ. It starts working the moment you get up in the morning and does not stop until you get into the office. You're searching, Joe, for things that don't exist, I mean beginnings. Ends and beginnings, there are no such things. There are only middles. This, as it will be seen, is other far than with Brooks taken otherwhere in song. We love the things we love for what they are. A man will sometimes devote all his life to the development of one part of his body, the wishbone. A successful lawsuit is one worn by a policeman. A champion of the working man has never yet been known to die of overwork. A champion of the working class has never been known to die of overwork. I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Forgive me my nonsense as I also forgive the nonsense of those who think they talk sense. It's God, I'd have known him by Blake's picture anywhere. It looked as if a night of dark intent was coming, and not only a night, an age. Someone had better be prepared for rage. There would be more than ocean water broken before God's last, put out the light, was spoken. I've had a lover's quarrel with the world. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if should ever come back. I turned to speak to God about the world's despair, but to make bad matters worse, I found God wasn't there. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. Skepticism, is that anything more than we used to mean when we said, well, what have we here? Skepticism, is that anything more than we used to mean when we said, well, what have we here? So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. The land was ours before we were the land. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. The land was ours before we were the land's. By working faithfully 8 hours a day, you may eventually get to be a boss and work 12 hours a day. I am not a teacher, but an awakener. Happiness makes up in height what it lacks in length. The dog barks backwards without getting up. I can remember when he was a pup. The figure a poem makes. It begins in delight and ends in wisdom, in a clarification of life, not necessarily a great clarification, such as sects and cults are founded on, but in a momentary stay against confusion. All the fun's in how you say a thing. Do you know, considering the market, there are more poems produced than any other thing? No wonder poets sometimes have to seem so much more businesslike than businessmen. Their wares are so much harder to get rid of. For me, the initial delight is in the surprise of remembering something I didn't know I knew. I have never started a poem yet whose end I knew. Writing is discovering. I am sure I have heard this several times from places I can't recall, but it's not already in the Gaia Quotes database. So I add this profound insight from the fields of psychological healing and spiritual evolution. It sure has helped me. Nearly everybody is looking for something brave to do. I don't know why people shouldn't write poetry. That's brave. I am one who has been acquainted with the night. Keep all your troubles in your own pocket. But, make sure that the pocket has a hole. For, dear me, why abandon a belief, merely because it ceases to be true? Cling to it long enough, and not a doubt, it will turn true again, for so it goes. The best thing we're put here for's to see, the strongest thing that's given us to see with's a telescope. Someone in every town, seems to me, owes it to the town to keep one. That day she put our heads together, fate had her imagination about her, your head so much concerned with outer, mine with inner, weather. Poets need not go to Niagara to write about the force of falling water. Any eye is an evil eye that looks in on to a mood apart. Democracy is the best chance for the best people. The rose is a rose, and was always a rose. But now the theory goes that the apple's a rose, and the pear is, and so's the plum, I suppose. The dear only knows what will next prove a rose. You, of course, are a rose but were always a rose. The fact is the sweetest dream that labor knows. Why make so much of fragmentary blue in here and there a bird, or butterfly, or flower, or wearing stone, or open eye, when heaven presents in sheets the solid hue? You, of course, are a rose but were always a rose. The first thing I do in any town I come to is ask if it has a bookstore. I have wished a bird would fly away, and not sing by my house all day, have clapped my hands at him from the door when it seemed as if I could bear no more. The fault must partly have been in me. The bird was not to blame for his key. And of course there must be something wrong in wanting to silence any song. There are tones of voices that mean more than words. Oh, give us pleasure in the orchestra white, like nothing else by day, like ghosts by night. It should be of the pleasure of a poem itself to tell how it can. The figure a poem makes. It begins in delight and ends in wisdom. The figure is the same for love. But strictly held by none, is loosely bound by countless silken ties of love and thought to everything on earth the compass round. And only by one's going slightly taught in the capriciousness of summer air is of the slightest bondage made aware. We get twigged now and then on how we made this country. Well, we took the whole business, of course. It's not just that corner that we took from Mexico. When we got it all together, we got a very shapely country, the best continental cut in all the world, between the two oceans and in the right temperature zone. An idea comes as close to something for nothing as you can get. I was under 20 when I deliberately put it to myself one night after good conversation that there are moments when we actually touch and talk what the best writing can only come near. The curse of our book language is not so much that it keeps forever to the same set phrases, but that it sounds forever with the same reading tones. We must go out into the vernacular for tones that haven't been brought to book. Unless I'm wrong I but obey the urge of a song, I'm bound away. And I may return if dissatisfied with what I learn from having died. Tree at my window, window tree, my sash is lowered when night comes on, but let there never be curtain drawn between you and me. We cannot tell some people what it is believe, partly because they are too stupid to understand, partly because we are too proudly vague to explain. The chance is the remotest, of its going much longer unnoticed, that I'm not keeping pace with the headlong human race. The sun was warm but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day. When the sun is out and the wind is still, you're 1 month on in the middle of May. But if you so much as dare to speak, a cloud come over the sunlit arch, and wind comes off a frozen peak, and you're 2 months back in the middle of March. Don't join too many gangs. Join few if any. Join the United States and join the family, but not much in between unless a college. It's God. I recognized him from Blake's picture. There are 3 things, after all, that a poem must reach: the eye, the ear, and what we may call the heart or the mind. It is the most important of all to reach the heart of the reader. I dwell with a strangely aching heart in that vanished abode there far apart. Poetry is a reaching out forward expression, an effort to find fulfillment. I still say the only education worth anything is self-education. O hushed October morning mild, begin the hours of this day slow, make the day seem to us less brief. Retard the sun with gentle mist, enchant the land with amethyst. The poet, as everyone knows, must strike his individual note sometime between the ages of 15 and 25. He may hold it a long time, or a short time, but it is then that he must strike it or never. School and college have been conducted with the almost express purpose of keeping him busy with something else till the danger of his ever creating anything is past. There is little much beyond the grave, but the strong are saying nothing until they see. A true sonnet goes 8 lines and then takes a turn for better or worse and goes 6 or 8 lines more. Not yesterday I learned to know the love of bare November days before the coming of the snow. For dear me, why abandon a belief merely because it ceases to be true? You've got to be brave and you've got to be bold. Brave enough to take your chance on your own discrimination, what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. Poetry should be common in experience but uncommon in books. I never take my own side in a quarrel. Have courage and a little willingness to venture and be defeated. Yes, of course, this age is materialistic, but the only way to counteract it is to create spiritual things. Don't worry yourself about the materialism too much. Create and stir other people to create. Let cloud shapes swarm, let chaos storm, I wait for form. I play better tennis because the court is there. I fail to see what fun, what satisfaction a God can find in laughing at how badly men fumble at the possibilities. Never discuss the poem you contemplate writing. It's like turning on the outside spigot. It takes all the pressure off the upstairs bathroom. When a friend calls to me from the road and slows his horse to a meaning walk, I don't stand still and look around on all the hills I haven't hoed, and shout from where I am, "What is it?" No, not as there is a time to talk. I thrust my hoe in the mellow ground, blade end up and 5 feet tall, and plod, I go up to the stone wall for a friendly visit. Friends make pretense of following to the grave, but before one is in it, their minds are turned and making the best of their way back to life and living people and things they understand. I'm always saying something that's just the edge of something more. Everything written is as good as it is dramatic. It need not declare itself in form, but it is drama or nothing. Far in the pillared dark thrush music went, almost like a call to come into the dark and lament. But no, I was out for stars, I would not come in. I meant not even if asked, and I hadn't been. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. And so I dream of going back to be. Possessing what we still were unpossessed by, possessed by what we now no more possessed. The question that he frames in all but words is what to make of a diminished thing. Nothing gold can stay. I am assured at any rate man's practically inexterminate. Someday I must go into that. There's always been an Ararat where someone else begot to start the world all over at. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. It takes all sorts of in- and outdoor schooling to get adapted to my kind of fooling. I'd like to get away from Earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. The snake stood up for evil in the garden. I hate the idea that you ought to read the whole of anybody. Word I was in my life alone, word I had no one left but God. Keats mourned that the rainbow, which as a boy had been for him a magic thing, had lost its glory because the physicists had found it resulted merely from the refraction of the sunlight by the raindrops. Yet knowledge of its causation could not spoil the rainbow for me. I am sure that it is not given to man to be omniscient. There will always be something left to know, something to excite the imagination of the poet and those attuned to the great world in which they live. Page 64. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, and wants it down. The difference between a man and his valet, they both smoke the same cigars, but only one pays for them. Courage is in the air in bracing whiffs better than all the stalemate ands and ifs. Courage is of the heart by derivation, and great it is. But fear is of the soul. Warm in December, cold in June, you say. I don't suppose the water's changed at all. You and I know enough to know it's warm compared with cold, and cold compared with warm. But all the fun's in how you say a thing. Love at the lips was touch as sweet as I could bear, and once that seemed too much, I lived on air. Suddenly, quietly, you realize that, from this moment forth, you will no longer walk through this life alone. Like a new sun, this awareness arises within you, freeing you from fear, opening your life. It is the beginning of love, and the end of all that came before. But these are flowers that fly and all but sing. And now from having ridden out desire they lie closed over in the wind and cling where wheels have freshly sliced the April. Meyer. One luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. Any work of art must first of all tell a story. I have just been to a city in the West, a city full of poets, a city they have made safe for poets. The whole city is so lovely that you do not have to write it up to make it poetry, it is ready-made for you. But, I don't know, the poetry written in that city might not seem like poetry if read outside of the city. It would be like the jokes made when you were drunk. You have to get drunk again to appreciate them. Style is less the man than the way a man takes himself. All there is to writing is having ideas. To learn to write is to learn to have ideas. A breeze discovered my open book and began to flutter the leaves to look. It is absurd to think that the only way to tell if a poem is lasting is to wait and see if it lasts. The right reader of a good poem can tell the moment it strikes him that he has taken an immortal wound that he will never get over it. Fireflies in the Garden by Robert Frost 1874–1963. Here come real stars to fill the upper skies, and here on earth come emulating flies, that though they never equal stars in size, and they were never really stars at heart, achieve at times a very star-like start. Only, of course, they can't sustain the part. Sarcastic science, she would like to know, in her complacent ministry of fear, how we propose to get away from here when she has made things so we have to go or be wiped out. Will she be asked to show us how by rocket we may hope to steer to some star off there, say, a half light year through temperature of absolute zero? Why wait for science to supply the how when any amateur can tell it now? The way to go away should be the same as 50 million years ago we came, if anyone remembers how that was. I have a theory, but it hardly does. And one of the three great things in the world is gossip, you know. First there's religion, and then there's science, and then there's friendly gossip. Those are the three great things. Men work together, whether they work together or apart. Oh, give us pleasure in the flowers today, and give us not to think so far away as the uncertain harvest, keep us here all simply in the springing of the year. Oh, give us pleasure in the orchard white, like nothing else by day, like ghosts by night, and make us happy in the happy bees, the swarm dilating round the perfect trees. He burned his house down for the fire insurance and spent the proceeds on a telescope. Soft petals, yes, but not so barren quite, mingled with these, smooth bean and wrinkled pea winky face. And go along with you ere you lose sight of what you came for and become like me, slave to a springtime passion for the earth. How love burns through the putting in the seed on through the watching for that early birth when, just as the soil tarnishes with weed, the sturdy seedling with arched body comes shouldering its way and shedding the earth crumbs. If the day ever comes when they know who they are, they may know better where they are. My long two-pointed ladder's sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough. But I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night, the scent of apples, I am drowsing off. At bottom the world isn't a joke. We only joke about it to avoid an issue with someone, to let someone know that we know he's there with his questions, to disarm him by seeming to have heard and done justice to his side of the standing argument. The rose is a rose, and was always a rose. But the theory now goes that the apple's a rose. All those who try to go it sole alone, too proud to be beholden for relief, are absolutely sure to come to grief. What you want, what you're hanging around in the world waiting for, is for something to occur to you. I could define poetry this way: it is that which is lost out of both prose and verse in translation. Our life runs down in sending up the clock. The brook runs down in sending up our life. The sun runs down in sending up the brook. And there is something sending up the sun. An idea is a feat of association. If one by one we counted people out. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. Something sinister in the tone told me my secret must be known. Word I was in the house alone somehow must have gotten abroad. Word I was in my life alone. Word I had no one left but God. Have I not walked without an upward look of caution under stars that very well might not have missed me when they shot and fell? It was a risk I had to take and took. Americans are like a rich father who wishes he knew how to give his son the hardships that made him rich. The beauty of enmity is insecurity, the beauty of friendship is insecurity. And nothing to look backward to with pride, and nothing to look forward to with hope. Nature's first green is gold. Meditate nothing. Learn to contemplate. Contemplate glory. There will be a light. Contemplate truth until it burns your eyes out. To time it never seems that he is brave to set himself against the peaks of snow to lay them level with the running wave, nor is he overjoyed when they lie low, but only grave, contemplative and grave. What is this talked of mystery of birth, but being mounted bareback on the earth? Freud was way off base in considering sex the fundamental motivation. The ruling passion in men is minding each other's business. Don't be agnostic, be something. I wonder about the trees. Why do we wish to bear forever the noise of these more than another noise so close to our dwelling place? One of the hardest things in life to accept is a called third strike. The style is the man. Rather say the style is the way the man takes himself, and to be at all charming or even bearable, the way is almost rigidly prescribed. If it is with outer seriousness, it must be with inner humor. If it is with outer humor, it must be with inner seriousness. No other way will do. Whose woods these are I think I know. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. I end not far from my going forth by picking the faded blue of the last remaining aster flower to carry again to you. The sweet of bitter bark and burning clove. But he had gone his way, the grass all mown, and I must be, as he had been, alone, as all must be, I said within my heart, whether they work together or apart. I dwell in a lonely house I know that vanished many a summer ago. Heaven gives its glimpses only to those not in position to look too close. A voice said, "Look me in the stars and tell me truly, men of earth, if all the soul and body scars were not too much to pay for birth." The sister's face fell all in wrinkles of responsibility. She wanted to do right. She'd have to think. So when at times the mob is swayed to carry praise or blame too far, we may choose something like a star to stay our minds on and be stayed. Skepticism, is that anything more than we used to mean when we said, well, what have we here? Man that is of woman born is apt to be as vain as his mother. Nor is there wanting in the press some spirit to stand simply forth, heroic in its nakedness, against the uttermost of earth. The tale of earth's unhonored things sounds nobler there than 'neath the sun, and the mind whirls and the heart sings, and a shout greets the daring one. An idea is a feat of association, and the height of it is a good metaphor. The first thing I do in the morning is to make my bed, and while I am making up my bed I am making up my mind as to what kind of a day I am going to have. There is the fear that we shan't prove worthy in the eyes of someone who knows us at least as well as we know ourselves. That is the fear of God. And there is the fear of man, fear that men won't understand us and we shall be cut off from them. If it were a dog, it would have bitten you already. Actual twents, at any hand was, dan o alanjabetin. Meaning, said to someone who is looking for something which is right under his nose. Source, Twents Woordenboek. Twents in Woord en Gebruik. People who read me seem to be divided into 4 groups, 25% like me for the right reasons, 25% like me for the wrong reasons, 25% hate me for the wrong reasons, 25% hate me for the right reasons. It's that last 25% that worries me. Now no joy but lacks salt that is not dashed with pain and weariness and fault. I crave the stain of tears, the aftermark of almost too much love, the sweet of bitter bark and burning clove. There's nothing I'm afraid of like scared people. The nearest friends can go with anyone to death, come so far short they might as well not try to go at all. The line-storm clouds fly tattered and swift, the road is forlorn all day, where a myriad snowy quartz stones lift, and the hoofprints vanish away. The roadside flowers, too wet for the bee, expend their bloom in vain. Come over the hills and far with me, and be my love in the rain. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever truly done for heaven and the future's sakes. The only certain freedoms in departure. Hell is a half-filled auditorium. I only hope that when I am free, as they are free to go in quest of the knowledge beyond the bounds of life, it may not seem better to me to rest. Our life runs down in sending up the clock. The brook runs down in sending up our life. The sun runs down in sending up the brook. And there is something sending up the sun. It is this backward motion toward the source, against the stream, that most we see ourselves in, the tribute of the current to the source. It is from this in nature we are from. It is most us. Our very life depends on everything's recurring till we answer from within. For I have had too much of apple picking, I am overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. Then smoke and mist, who better could appraise the kindred spirit of an inner haze? Lovers, forget your love and list to the love of these. She a window flower and he a winter breeze. Every poem is a momentary stay against the confusion of the world. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love, I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. I would not come in. I meant not even if asked, and I hadn't been. Life must be kept up at a great rate in order to absorb any considerable amount of learning. The herd is not enough, I long for weight and strength, to feel the earth as rough to all my length. My goal in life is to unite my avocation with my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight. Sentences are not different enough to hold the attention unless they are dramatic. No ingenuity of varying structure will do. All that can save them is the speaking tone of voice somehow entangled in the words and fastened to the page for the ear of the imagination. That is all that can save poetry from sing-song, all that can save prose from itself. The only way out is to go through. Nature is always hinting at us. I never feel more at home than at a ball game. Poetry is play. I'd even rather have you think of it as a sport. For instance, like football. The people I am most afraid of are those who are the most afraid. Thinking isn't agreeing or disagreeing. That's voting. Fortunately, we don't need to know how bad an age is. There is something we can always be doing without reference to how good or bad the age is. Far more violence has been done in obeying the law than in breaking the law. The best way for a person to have happy thoughts is to count his blessings and not his cash. Happiness makes up in height for what it lacks in length. Love is an irresistible desire to be irresistibly desired. Poetry begins in delight and ends in wisdom. The sidelong glance is what you depend on. My definition of poetry, if I were forced to give one, would be this: words that have become deeds. I cut my own hair. I got sick of barbers because they talk too much. And too much of their talk was about my hair coming out. Of course there is matter for remark in poems. Nobody denies that. But it must be solemnly laid on everybody in this world to make his own observations and remarks. That's what we mean by thinking, and that's about all we mean. A teacher says to a pupil, watch me notice a few things in the next few months. Let's see you notice a few things too. It's hard to get into this world and hard to get out of it, and what's in between doesn't make much sense. What we live by we die by. Freedom is when you are easy in the harness. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. Only God and I knew what I meant when I wrote it, now only God knows. Loyalty is that for the lack of which your gang will shoot you without benefit of trial by jury. A definite purpose, like blinders on a horse, inevitably narrows its possessor's point of view. A poem may be worked over once it is in being, but may not be worried into being. I came from a very intellectual neighborhood. When we played cowboys and Indians as kids, I had to be Gandhi. If you remember only one thing I've said, remember that an idea is a feat of association, and the height of it is a good metaphor. If you have never made a good metaphor, then you don't know what it's all about. I heard someone say he, Carl Sandburg, was the kind of writer who had everything to gain and nothing to lose by being translated into another language. Yes, and even for the past, that it will turn out to have been all right for what it was. Something I can accept. Mistakes made by the self I had to be or was not able to be. Ends and beginnings, there are no such things. There are only middles. I've given offense by saying I'd as soon write free verse as play tennis with the net down. Create and stir other people to create. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. Life is tons of discipline. Your first discipline is your vocabulary, then your grammar and your punctuation. Nothing is quite honest that is not commercial, but not everything commercial is honest. Poetry is the renewal of words, setting them free, and that's what a poet is doing, loosening the words. Life is tons of discipline. Let's get my incantation right. I wish I may, I wish I might give Earth another satellite. When clever people ask me where I get a poem, I despair. Before now poetry has taken notice of wars, and what are wars but politics transformed from chronic to acute and bloody? We're either nothing or a god's regret. A name with meaning could bring up a child, taking the child out of the parent's hands. Better a meaningless name, I should say, as leaving more to nature and happy chance. Name children some names and see what you do. The reason artists show so little interest in public freedom is because the freedom they've come to feel the need of is a kind no one can give them. They can scarce attain the freedom of their own material. Scholars and artists thrown together are often annoyed at the puzzle of where they differ. Both work from knowledge, but I suspect they differ most importantly in the way their knowledge is come by. Scholars get theirs with conscientious thoroughness along projected lines of logic, poets theirs cavalierly and as it happens in and out of books. They stick to nothing deliberately, but let what will stick to them like burrs where they walk in the fields. Lord, I have loved your sky, be it set against or for me, have loved it clear and high, or low and stormy. I have miles to go before I sleep. I am not a nature poet. There is almost always a person in my poems. Evolution is like walking on a rolling barrel. The walker isn't so much interested in where the barrel is going as he is in keeping on top of it. End is a gloomy word. People are inexterminable like flies and bed bugs. There will always be some that survive in cracks and crevices. That's us. Summoning artists to participate in the august occasions of the state seems something artists ought to celebrate. Today is for my cause a day of days. It is only a moment here and a moment there that the greatest writer has. Some cognizance of the fact must be taken in your teaching. Let me be the one to do what is done. You've got to love what's lovable, and hate what's hateable. It takes brains to see the difference. Poetry begins in trivial metaphors, pretty metaphors, grace metaphors, and goes on to the profoundest thinking that we have. Poetry provides the one permissible way of saying one thing and meaning another. People say, "Why don't you say what you mean?" We never do that, do we, being all of us too much poets? We like to talk in parables and in hints and in indirections, whether from diffidence or some other instinct. If the writer does not cry, the reader does not cry. Diplomacy, N1. The patriotic art of lying for one's country. 2. The art of letting someone have your way. 3. The art of saying, "Nice doggy," until you can find a rock. A diplomat is a man who always remembers a woman's birthday but never remembers her age. I write to find out what I didn't know I knew. When work becomes play, and play becomes your work, your life unfolds. Belief is better than anything else, and it is best when wrapped, above paying its respects to anybody's doubt whatsoever. Humor is the most engaging cowardice. With it myself I have been able to hold some of my enemy in play far out of gunshot. Affection is an overpowering craving to be compellingly sought. Yet some say love by being thrall and simply staying possesses all in several beauty that thought fares far to find fused in another star. Love has earth to which she clings. There is no love. There's only love of men and women, love of children, love of friends, of men, of God, divine love, human love, parental love, roughly discriminated for the rough. When the spent sun throws up its rays on cloud and goes down burning into the gulf below, no voice in nature is heard to cry aloud at what has happened. Birds, at least, must know it is the change to darkness in the sky. Murmuring something quiet in her breast, one bird begins to close a faded eye, or overtaken too far from his nest, hurrying low above the grove, some waif swoops just in time to his remembered tree. At most he thinks or twitters softly, safe. Now let the night be dark for all of me. Let the night be too dark for me to see into the future. Let what will be, be. The footpath down to the well is healed. I could give all to time except what I myself have held. Of all crimes the worst is to steal the glory from the great and brave, even more accursed than to rob the grave. When I was young, I was so interested in baseball that my family was afraid I'd waste my life and be a pitcher. Later they were afraid I'd waste my life and be a poet. They were right. But I may be one who does not care ever to have tree bloom or bear. Leaves and bark, to lean against and hear in the dark. Petals I may have once pursued. Leaves are all my darker mood. Now close the windows and hush all the fields, if the trees must, let them silently toss. The tree the tempest with a crash of wood throws down in front of us is not to bar our passage to our journey's end for good, but just to ask us who we think we are. Live and let live, believe and let believe. 'Twas said the lesser gods were only traits of the one awful God. Just so the saints are God's white light refracted into colors. Nature's never quite sure she hasn't erred in her vague design. There would be more than ocean water broken before God's last put out the light was spoken. In a glass of cider it seemed I was a mite of sediment that waited for the bottom to ferment so I could catch a bubble in a scent. I rode up on one till the bubble burst, and when that left me to sink back reversed I was no worse off than I was at first. I'd catch another bubble if I waited. The thing was to get now and then elated. Two such as you with such a master speed cannot be parted nor be swept away. The armful for every parcel I stoop down to seize I lose some other off my arms and knees, and the whole pile is slipping, bottles, buns, extremes too hard to comprehend at once yet nothing I should care to leave behind. With all I have to hold with hand and mind and heart, if need be, I will do my best to keep their building balanced at my breast. I crouch down to prevent them as they fall, then sit down in the middle of them all. I had to drop the armful in the road and try to stack them in a better load. Oh, come forth into the storm and rout and be my love in the rain. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain, and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet. When far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye, and further still at an unearthly light, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. Let those possess the land, and only those, who love it with a love so strong and stupid that they may be abused and taken advantage of and made fun of by business, law, and art. Loosely bound by countless silken ties of love and thought to everything on earth the compass round. A man has got to keep his extrication. The important thing is not to get bogged down in what he has to do to earn a living. Trust him to have his bitter politics against his unacquaintances, the rich who sleep in houses of their own, though mortgaged. Conservatives, they don't know what to save. I see for nature no defeat in one tree's overthrow, or for myself in my retreat for yet another blow. For hard it is to keep from being king when it's in you and in the situation. For I thought Epicurus and Lucretius by nature meant the whole goddamn machinery. Nothing not built with hands of course is sacred. But here is not a question of what's sacred, rather of what to face or run away from. I'd hate to be a runaway from nature. There is much in nature against us. But we forget, take nature altogether since time began, including human nature, in peace and war, and it must be a little more in favor of man. The mind is not the heart. I may yet live, as I know others live, to wish in vain to let go with the mind, of cares, at night, to sleep, but nothing tells me that I need learn to let go with the heart. The master speed no speed of wind or water rushing by, but you have speed far greater. You can climb back up a stream of radiance to the sky, and back through history up the stream of time. And you were given this swiftness, not for haste nor chiefly that you may go where you will, but in the rush of everything to waste, that you may have the power of standing still off any still or moving thing you say. Two such as you with such a master speed from one another once you are agreed that life is only life forevermore together wing to wing and oar to oar. Some spirit to stand simply forth, heroic in its nakedness, against the uttermost of earth. What are we? Young or new? We must be something. He thought that I was after him for a feather, the white one in his tail, like one who takes everything said as personal to himself. I believe in teaching, but I don't believe in going to school. I do not see why I should e'er turn back, or those should not set forth upon my track to overtake me, who should miss me here and long to know if still I held them dear. They would not find me changed from him they knew, only more sure of all I thought was true. It comes down to a doubt about the wisdom of having children after having had them, so there is nothing we can do about it but warn the children they perhaps should have none. I own I never really warmed to the reformer or reformed. And yet conversion has its place not halfway down the scale of grace. And of course there must be something wrong in wanting to silence any song. More men die of worry than of work, because more men worry than work. The moon for all her light and grace has never learned to know her place. I shall set forth for somewhere, I shall make the reckless choice some say when they are in voice and tossing so as to scare the white clouds over them on. I shall have less to say, but I shall be none. The people I want to hear about are the people who take risks. New is a word for fools in towns who think style upon style in dress and thought at last must get somewhere. As a confirmed astronomer I'm always for a better sky. When I was young my teachers were the old. I gave up fire for form till I was cold. Tolerance is the uncomfortable feeling that in the end the other could be right. The test is always how we treat the poor. But this we know, the obstacle that checked and tripped the body, shot the spirit on further than target ever showed or shone. I have remained resentful to this day when any but myself presumed to say that there was anything I couldn't be. The truth is the river flows into the canyon of ceasing to question what doesn't concern us, as sooner or later we have to see somewhere. But what would interest you about the brook? It's always cold in summer, warm in winter. I hope to leave behind a few poems it will be hard to get rid of. Everyone asks for freedom for himself, the man free love, the businessman free trade, the writer and talker free speech and free press. No, in country money, the country scale of gain, the requisite lift of spirit has never been found. The problem for the king is just how strict the lack of liberty, the squeeze of the law and discipline should be in school and state. God turned to speak to me, don't anybody laugh, God found I wasn't there, at least not over half. States strong enough to do good are but few. Their number would seem limited to 3. It was far in the sameness of the wood, I was running with joy on the demon's trail, though I knew what I hunted was no true God. Bounds should be set to ingenuity for being so cruel in bringing change unheralded on the unready. A nation has to take its natural course of progress round and round in circles from king to mob to king to mob to king until the eddy of it eddies out. If there is one thing in life that I have learned about life, it goes on. How are we to write the Russian novel in America as long as life goes so unterribly? The city is all right. To live in one is to be civilized, stay up and read or sing and dance all night and see sunrise by waiting up instead of getting up. In heaven we are all ghostwriters, if we write at all. As for his evil tidings, Belshazzar's overthrow, why hurry to tell Belshazzar what soon enough he would know? Summary riposte to the dreary wail, there's no knowing what love is all about. Poets know a lot. Nations like the Cuban and the Swiss can never hope to wage a global mission. No holy wars for them. The most the small can ever give us is a nuisance brawl. Memento mori and obey the Lord. Art and religion love the somber chord. You can't trust God to be unmerciful. There you have the beginning of all wisdom. You know how cunningly mankind is planned. We have one loving and one hating hand. The loving's made to hold each other like, while with the hating other hand we strike. The best way to hate is the worst. 'Tis to find what the hated need, never mind of what actual worth, and wipe that out of the earth. Let them die of unsatisfied greed. A turning point in modern history. One age is like another for the soul. God once declared he was true and then took the veil and withdrew. As it is more blessed to receive, so it must be more blessed to receive than to give back. Not to sink under being man and wife, but get some color and music out of life. Our lives laid down in war and peace may not be found acceptable in heaven's sight. And that they may be is the only prayer worth praying. May my sacrifice be found acceptable in heaven's sight. One of the lies would make it out that nothing ever presents itself before us twice. Where would we be at last if that were so? Our very life depends on everything's recurring till we answer from within. The truly educated can listen to any view without losing their temper or self-confidence. Poets like Shakespeare know more about poetry than any $25 an hour man. I have wished a bird would fly away, and not sing by my house all day. A bird half wakened in the lunar noon sang halfway through its little unborn tune. Ants are a curious race. We disparage reason, but all the time it's what we're most concerned with. There's will as motor and there's will as brakes. Reason is, I suppose, the steering gear. Both T.S. Eliot and I like to play, but I like to play euchre, while he likes to play Eucharist. In spring more mortal singers than belong to any one place cover us with song. Thrush, bluebird, blackbird, sparrow, and robin throng. A poet must never make a statement simply because it sounds poetically exciting. He must also believe it to be true. W. H. Auden. A poem begins as a lump in the throat, a sense of wrong, a homesickness, a lovesickness. It finds the thought and the thought finds the words. Freedom is slavery, some poets tell us. Enslave yourself to the right leader's truth, Christ's or Karl Marx, and it will set you free. What an exciting age it is we live in, with all this talk about the hope of youth and nothing made of youth. The old dog barks backward without getting up. I can remember when he was a pup. What makes a nation in the beginning is a good piece of geography. He says the best way out is always through. And I can agree to that, or in so far as that I can see no way out but through. Earth would soon be uninhabitable as the moon. What for that matter had it ever been? Who advised man to come and live therein? God made a beauteous garden with lovely flowers strown, but one straight, narrow pathway that was not overgrown. And to this beauteous garden he brought mankind to live, and said to you, my children, these lovely flowers I give. Prune ye my vines and fig trees, with care my flowers tend, but keep the pathway open, your home is at the end. God's garden. I'm not confused. I'm just well mixed. Nothing flatters me more than to have it assumed that I could write prose, unless it be to have it assumed that I once pitched a baseball with distinction. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. Time and tide wait for no man, but time always stands still for a woman of 30. Out alone in the winter rain, intent on giving and taking pain. The difference between a job and a career is the difference between 40 and 60 hours a week. Families break up when they get hints you don't intend and miss hints that you do. What is done for the love of it or not really done at all. It looked as if a night of dark intent was coming, and not only a night, an age. Someone had better be prepared for rage. A poem begins with a lump in the throat. We ran as if to meet the moon. The only way around is through. A champion of the working man has never been known to die of overwork. The sun was warm but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day. Ah, when to the heart of man was it ever less than a treason to go with the drift of things, to yield with a grace to reason, and bow and accept the end of a love or a season? Nature does not complete things. She is chaotic. Man must finish, and he does so by making a garden and building a wall. But not gold in commercial quantities, just enough gold to make the engagement rings and marriage rings of those who owned the farm. What gold more innocent could one have asked for? Courage is the human virtue that counts most. Courage to act on limited knowledge and insufficient evidence. That's all any of us have. Don't be an agnostic. Be something. Come grow old with me, for the best is yet to come. The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. Poetry is what gets lost in translation. Like a piece of ice on a hot stove, the poem must ride on its own melting. Read it 100 times, it will forever keep its freshness as a metal keeps its fragrance. It can never lose its sense of a meaning that once unfolded by surprise as it went. Like a piece of ice on a hot stove, the poem must ride on its own melting. College is a refuge from hasty judgment. I am not a teacher. I am an awakener. I never knew what was meant by choice of words. It was one word or none. Nothing can make injustice just but mercy. To be social is to be forgiving. Humor is the most engaging cowardice. I always entertain great hopes. There is one thing more exasperating than a wife who can cook and won't, and that's a wife who can't cook and will. Anything more than the truth would be too much. I turned to speak to God about the world's despair, but to make bad matters worse I found God wasn't there. Writing a poem is discovering. When I see birches bend to left and right, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. The heart can think of no devotion greater than being shore to the ocean, holding the curve of one position, counting an endless repetition. If you're looking for something to be brave about, consider fine arts. O hushed October morning mild, thy leaves have ripened to the fall, tomorrow's wind, if it be wild, should waste them all. The crows above the forest call, tomorrow they may form and go. O hushed October morning mild, begin the hours of this day slow. Make the day seem to us less brief. Hearts not averse to being beguiled, beguile us in the way you know. Release one leaf at break of day, at noon release another leaf, one from our trees, one far away. Butterflies, flowers that fly and all but sing. The Vermont mountains stretch extended straight, New Hampshire mountains curl up in a coil. We can make a little order where we are, and then the big sweep of history on which we can have no effect doesn't overwhelm us. We do it with colors, with a garden, with the furnishings of a room, or with sounds and words. We make a little form, and we gain composure. I don't like to see things on purpose. I like them to soak in. A friend asked me to go to the top of the Empire State Building once, and I told him that he shouldn't treat New York as a sight it's feeling, an emotional experience. And the same with every place else. Gathering leaves, spades take up leaves no better than spoons, and bags full of leaves are light as balloons. I make a great noise of rustling all day like rabbit and deer running away. But the mountains I raise elude my embrace, flowing over my arms and into my face. I may load and unload again and again till I fill the whole shed, and what have I then? Next to nothing for weight, and since they grew duller from contact with earth, next to nothing for color. Next to nothing for use. But a crop is a crop, and who's to say where the harvest shall stop? The only way out is through. Hope is not found in a way out but a way through. Unless you are educated in metaphor, you are not safe to be let loose in the world. Thinking is not to agree or disagree. That's voting. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep. The trees that have it in their pent-up buds to darken nature and be summer woods. All the fun is in how you say a thing. Poetry is what is lost in translation. It is also what is lost in interpretation. The afternoon knows what the morning never suspected. The only way round is through. You're always believing ahead of your evidence. What was the evidence I could write a poem? I just believed it. The most creative thing in us is to believe in a thing. Here are your waters and your watering place. Drink and be whole again beyond confusion. You're searching for things that don't exist, I mean beginnings. Ends and beginnings, there are no such things. There are only middles. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Nature is always hinting at us. It hints over and over again. And suddenly we take the hint. We love the things we love for what they are. I'm not a teacher, but an awakener. You don't have to deserve your mother's love. You have to deserve your father's. He's more particular. The father is always a Republican towards his son, and his mother's always a Democrat. You've often heard me say, perhaps too often, that poetry is what is lost in translation. It is also what is lost in interpretation. That little poem means just what it says, and it says what it means, nothing less but nothing more. The ear is the only true writer and the only true reader. I know people who read without hearing the sentence sounds, and they were the fastest readers. Eye-readers we call them. They get the meaning by glances. But they are bad readers because they miss the best part of what a good writer puts into his work. Good fences make good neighbors. Many lovers have been divorced by having what is free enforced. All thought is a feat of association, having what's in front of you bring up something in your mind that you almost didn't know you knew. Something we were withholding made us weak, until we found it was ourselves. The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. A poem begins with a lump in the throat, a homesickness or a love sickness. It is a reaching out toward expression, an effort to find fulfillment. A complete poem is one where an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. Haven't you heard, though, about the ships where war has found them out at sea? About the towns where war has come through opening clouds at night with droning speed further o'erhead than all but stars and angels and children in the ships and in the towns? War is for everyone, for children too. I wasn't going to tell you and I mustn't. The best way is to come uphill with me and have our fire and laugh and be afraid. What is required is sight and insight, then you might add one more, excite. There is absolutely no reason for being rushed along with the rush. Everybody should be free to go slow. How many things have to happen to you before something occurs to you? Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. How many times it thundered before Franklin took the hint. How many apples fell on Newton's head before he took the hint. Nature is always hinting at us. It hints over and over again. And suddenly we take the hint. All great things are done for their own sake. The rain to the wind said, "You push, and I'll pelt." They so smote the garden bed that the flowers actually knelt, and lay lodged though not dead. I know how the flowers felt. Freedom lies in being bold. Live life like it's the last breath you take, for that breath is the whole essence of living. The little things in life are what connects us to all the big things we live for. If we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. The best way out is always through.